Hello, everybody. Not sure how many people are here, but hopefully some over the internet can hear me as well. I want to talk to you. The reason I asked Roha to set this up, because all of you are exploring new things, new ideas, new possibilities. But most of you are exploring for yourself. That is, you're looking for your own answers. Now, a few of you that Roha's got teaching are also maybe considering your students. But with the exception of myself and Roha, most of you are focused on the present and what you can figure out. I'd like to try to make it clear that everything in what you know of the world is changing. That it's not just that people are going to be a little more empathic or a little nicer to each other. Everything's changing. That the laws of physics that Einstein set up are being rewritten. The ones he got right, some of them he got wrong. That the mathematics we use, and everything has math in it, is changing. That the way the medical profession and the healing professions will work is changing. The way education and child rearing will work for the next 1,000 years is changing. These are changing right now. And while it's important that these things change, it's even more important that they change correctly. At the start of a journey, a small deviation left or right can dramatically change the course you follow. And knowing this, we are doing all that we can to get the course set as correctly as possible. But there is just too much to do. The number of things that I'm working on is extraordinary. And so there are a lot of pieces I simply don't have time. I understand that a lot of people have had trouble with cycles of nausea or physical health of late, with cycles of emotional or mental highs and lows. And Roha's been dealing with those. She's been charting them and trying to figure them out and talking to you folks about them, to understand, to ken what's going on, so that she can know how to address it for the future. And I understand that Sitska is taking a lot of this amazing structure that Roha and you guys have developed, and she's adapting it for a new audience. She's adapting it for babies and children under 4 years of age and their parents. And that's amazing. This is something I don't have time to do. And it wouldn't happen if somebody didn't step up and say, I'm going to do it. It's important to know that some of what I'm doing could be called magic. These items that I've made, the Holy Child toys that many of you have, the stones for the belt levels that you have, there is no way in modern science to describe them. It's probably safest to call them magic. Does anybody know who Arthur C. Clarke was? Right? What did he say about magic? Well, he's famous for the quotes that says that magic is just science that scientists aren't advanced enough to understand. Any science sufficiently far advanced is indistinguishable from magic. Magic is just science the scientists haven't caught up to. Now, I'm working on recovering my abilities with mathematics so I can describe some of the things I understand about the map and the substrate and the projected experiences that we all work within mathematically, so that physicists and mathematicians can understand it and begin to work with it and change their theory of how things work. Does this matter? Well, of course it does. If a tall building goes up, there's a lot of physics and math in it. If an airplane flies, that's physics and math, the design, how it works. Your cell phones, your GPS, the text you're using right now, the technology we have, these are all based in math. And from math, it's, let's say its bastard child or its cousin is physics, with which math is applied to life. And so I'm working on developing a whole new branch of mathematics to try and explain these things. And it's going to take me some time. And until I can do that, until I can get math to explain it to the scientists, it remains in the category of magic. It is, however, still science. And what you guys can be doing to help, working on your own process is great. If that's what you want to do, I encourage it. But what you can be doing in addition, if you're willing, is beginning to work on the science yourself, beginning to make something more of what we're doing. Now, maybe for some of you, science is scary or an intimidating term and math is terrifying. I don't know. But the teaching company put out a series of videos on modern physics and how physics works. And I took a clip from that I'll play for you here. I think it's queued up.
I also want to dispel another notion about science and physics in particular. There's this notion about the scientific method, and it's actually, I think, enhanced by the way science is taught, not necessarily always as creatively as it might be in the public schools. We're given this notion of the scientist as somebody who sort of thinks up a hypothesis and writes it down very carefully and then puts on the white lab coat and marches into the lab and does all kinds of experiments and either verifies or throws out the hypothesis. It's a very rigid, rigorous process, very carefully spelled out what you do. Now, some science is done that way, and probably 99% of scientists are working in established areas of science where that is an appropriate way to do things. Does this drug kill cancer? I think it does. So I invent an experiment. I say, I'm going to test this drug. I'm going to put it on cancer cells. I'm going to see if they die. I go in the laboratory and I do that. Can I make a smaller computer chip by using this quantum mechanical property of the electron to build this particular device? I think I can. So I make a hypothesis. I put on my lab coat. I go in and I try to build the device and see if it works. Those are manifestations of the sort of basic scientific method as it's taught in schools. But I think the great science, the big science, the science that takes us leaps ahead in our understanding of physical reality is very different. I think that's a creative activity much more akin to art or composition of music or other creative human endeavors than it is to the sort of dry sense people have of science as this dull scientific method kind of thing. Science is a very creative activity, and it's most creative in particular when it's taking these big leaps forward. Einstein didn't do experiments. Einstein thought up relativity in his head. He said, this is the way the world has to be. And he wrote it down, and later the world proved to be that way when people did experiments. Science is a very creative activity, and I hope in this course you'll get a sense of that, because you'll see how some of the great minds of modern physics struggled with these bizarre consequences of what they were studying. So remember that this is a human activity. I'll try to emphasize that occasionally, but I won't give it as much emphasis as perhaps it deserves in the course of this relatively short length for this big a topic. Now, to end this lecture, I want to say one thing again to all of you who are sitting there saying, well, gee, this is not something I'm going to understand. It is something you're going to understand. My goal and my whole professional goal as a science teacher is to make science, particularly physics, comprehensible to the average person. You need to be intelligent, you need to be open-minded, but you do not need to know anything about science to understand what I'm about to describe. It doesn't take an Einstein to understand modern physics. It may have taken an Einstein to come up with modern physics, But once the genius of Einstein had done that, all of us can understand what modern physics has to say, and that's my goal. So if you're an interested non-scientist, you've got to be interested, but if you're interested, stay with me, and you will understand this material.
If you're an interested non-scientist, you don't have to be a scientist. You don't have to have a PhD or even be working on an undergraduate degree in science. You have to be interested. In a sense, a lot of this is the science of the explorers who set out in ships to cross the oceans and find new lands. It's the science of the person involved. It's not putting on a white lab coat and making up hypotheses. It's delving into something hidden, mysterious, unknown, and finding ways to test it, to measure it, to use it in your life. Yeah, it's great if you get into alpha, but so what? Well, if you can use it to scan more effectively, if you can use it to find what someone needs to feel better and help them to feel better, if you can begin to discover healing, if you can scan which stock to invest in or what course to take in school or whether to go out with someone or how to raise your kids. This is the kind of science that's useful. We take these things that are mystery, these things science can't measure yet. Science cannot send a probe down into the shamanic realm and record what goes on there. Science cannot explore what you see and hear and feel in the alpha range. You can put an EEG on your head and say, oh, you're in alpha, but that's about as useful as saying, oh, well, you're in a submarine. It doesn't tell you anything about what you're going to see on the ocean floor or what you might encounter. So what we're doing is science. And it's time to get as many people as possible into an enthusiastic exploration of the science. It doesn't mean you got to do math. There's no math in most of this. You like math, you can find it, but there's no math in most of it. This is about sensing, about feeling, about seeing, about scanning, about discovering, and paying attention to what you discover. Perhaps more importantly, this is about being open-minded. Now, if there are any sensors who listen to this, or who watch this, you may have at some point tried to sense the things right around you. That's what sensors do. But have you ever tried to extend your sense in a given direction? Say to reach out and sense someone across the room and know what's going on with them? Perhaps to reach out to someone who isn't in the room. Have you ever just said, all right, east. I'm going to scan east and see what I find? I started doing this many years ago. And once I got good at it, I was actually a bit confused by what I found. Because I can expand my senses and sense this world as, a big blue and green globe. But if I scan out in any direction, I don't find a curve that I follow around and come back. And this bugged me. I don't know if my scan was wrong or my ideas about the world are wrong. When I scan out far enough in any direction, I come to a break. I come to jagged edges where everything stops. And at first I thought this was an error on my part, but I've been doing it for so many years that I think this is real. And I've got some theories as to why that is. And someday those theories will be an active part of the science we know of the world we live in. But see, if I'd have said, nope, the world has to be round, and insisted on trying to make my perceptions match that, maybe I would have been able to make my perceptions discover a round world. But I wouldn't have discovered what I have consistently every single time. If I scan out right now in any direction, I come to a place where it ends, where what I sense of the world ends. This is what I mean by open-minded. You're going to discover things that don't make any sense. You're going to discover things that aren't right. There's a time when everybody thought the world was flat. If you'd had a good scanner who could scan, they would have tried to scan to the edge and see what's, off the edge. And what they would have found if they scanned far enough is they're looking at the back of their own head after going all the way around. because, the world's round. If they'd known it was flat, they wouldn't have found it. And even when we knew the world was round, people were pretty sure that the sun and the moon and the rest of them went around the world, because this world is the center of everything, because God said so. And if a good sensor had tried to sense that, it doesn't just have to be a sensor, right? A shaper can do some sensing. A source can be very good at sensing, especially in areas of emotion and gut level things. They may sense something that disagrees with what science, with what school, with religion has taught them. So a big part of what we do is being open-minded. So be aware, pay attention, be open-minded, and when you can, take notes or draw pictures or diagrams of what you're sensing and compare them with others, because in comparing them with others, you may find a perspective you would have missed on your own, or find something's happening to a lot of people you thought was just you. This is what I mean by science. And I want you to remember that science isn't the lab coat.
But I think the great science, the big science, the science that takes us leaps ahead in our understanding of physical reality, is very different. I think that's a creative activity much more akin to art or composition of music or other creative human endeavors than it is to the sort of dry sense people have of science as this dull scientific method kind of thing. Science is a very creative activity, and it's most creative in particular when it's taking these big leaps forward.
It's most creative when it's taking these big leaps forward. Most of you know Einstein and respect him. Einstein said that imagination is far more important than knowledge. Some of you know that. Some of you even know the rest of the quote. Why is imagination more important than knowledge? Imagination is more important than knowledge because knowledge only describes what you've been told, what you've seen and labeled. Knowledge only describes the limits you already have. Imagination lets you explore beyond those limits and discover what's on the other side. And so this is my first step here right now, is to try and convince as many people as possible that we are on the frontiers of science. As this physics teacher just said, real science, science at the cutting edge, science that's exploring new domains, isn't done in a sterile room in a white lab coat following procedures. It's done in thought experiments. It's done trekking through the jungle to see what's there. It's done navigating a boat to someplace new. Real science is involved. Sometimes it's dirty, it's present, it's hands-on. And this is what I want to encourage everyone to start doing. Because I don't have enough time or energy in my life to do the impossible list of things that's already on my plate. I have 8 different things right now I could list that are astoundingly important, and every one of them will take a lifetime to complete. No way unlikely I'm going to finish all of them. And those are secondary things. What I feel is my most important role is going to take much of my time for the next 20 years. And so most of my energy is aimed in that direction. And the other thing, like rewriting modern physics or creating this new branch of mathematics or exploring how the map projects to perceived realities or understanding these multiple dimensions or handling this recently awakened upwelling or interfacing with this massive gardener personality that is now watching over the shape of this world. All of these things need done. All of them may take lifetimes to really understand. And they're all low on my list, below the pieces that are really important. And see, those things, you'll see the results of those 50 years or 100 years from now. But what are you going to see 6 months from now, 2 years from now? Now just imagine that if I'm right, And 90% of the world is either already or quickly moving to a homosexual rather than a heterosexual orientation. Just imagine. Take a moment and consider what this is going to do to marriages and the effects it's going to have on families. Imagine divorce courts, divorce lawyers, divorce laws, how all those things are going to have to change. Imagine the emotional chaos as people begin to accept in themselves that something so fundamental has changed. Imagine whole new types of movies and music and television to explain these things to us, the modern mythologies. Somebody's got to design them and write them. Imagine, this is just one piece, this sexual orientation shift. Imagine the number of differences it's going to make in every part of society. And if there isn't one of us, if there isn't someone a little bit awake, someone with a little bit of understanding of integrity, someone who's been cleaning up the men in the fen so they're not acting from their parents' angers and prejudices, but able to purely scan it on their own. If they don't have some idea of this, if they're not at least trying to bring their heart online, how well are they going to handle these things? How much damage is going to happen to the people, to this world, to these worlds? Because there isn't one of us working on it. Now, imagine, well, you don't have to imagine, you look back on the history of the past 20 years. Children have been getting steadily more intelligent and far more intuitive. There are a huge number of books on the indigo children, the crystal children, the star kids, these kinds of things. Lots and lots. There's whole libraries of this stuff now. And people are doing the best they can to figure out how to handle it. But you're seeing things like all of the kids on drugs. I'm not talking illegal drugs. I'm talking Ritalin and all these mind-destroying legal drugs that people are using to try and stabilize their kids because they don't understand the meta, because no one's taught them about it. Damage being done to children and families every day all over the world because there isn't someone who understands the meta. Look at modern education and how it's focused on memorization and regurgitation of information, much of which is no longer relevant as the world's changing. And compare that to the way that you guys and your students, your classmates, the way you learn and the way you process and the way you understand. Imagine trying to read a 4th grade textbook with a class of 4th graders when you can scan. And you're supposed to memorize and recite the stuff that doesn't scan as well as the stuff that does. Well, that's going to hurt. That's going to be unpleasant. That's going to be wrong in every sense of the word. These people need to be given an educational method that understands their abilities, that teaches them to scan, and that uses that to do many of these things. Governments have to change. Things that work with the environment, it's all going to have to change. So many areas are going to have to change, and I can't do them alone. And Roja's got her hands full with the Elfpath. She can't take up all these new. Every one of you who hears this is being offered the chance to take a starring role. You don't have to be in front of people if that scares you. I don't mean a star on stage, but a star as someone who does amazing, incredible work, discovering and exploring new frontiers. And these are things we all need to take up together. If you don't do it, that's fine, if that challenge doesn't call you. But the world needs it. Now, as this physics teacher just said, the crazy stuff, the big stuff, may take an Einstein to understand. But once you've got an Einstein to explain the basics, you don't need hundreds of thousands of Einstein-level scientists to explore it and see the shape of it and how it fits into our world and how it changes things. Einstein didn't still have to be here to apply his theory of relativity to cell phones so you can have a GPS. And yes, the GPS requires a lot of the technology of the mathematics of relativity. It just took someone who was willing to listen to what he had to say and apply it to their field. So this is your challenge. to take up this science and begin to apply it in any place in your life that calls to you, that interests you. So, that said, I'll talk about a couple of places that might interest you. Most of you know how to get into alpha. Some of you even know there's a difference between getting into alpha and getting into deep alpha. There's a deeper version where you get a much more fundamental read. But below alpha, there's a whole range of theta states you can get into. And below theta, there are layers of delta. And below that, there's actually one that most of you will never know. It's too deep to find, but it's there. And then the alpha range is the beta range is the day-to-day thinking above the alpha. Now above beta, there is a whole gamma range. There's a basic gamma and there's a high gamma range you can get into. And there's a lambda and a high lambda range you can get into. And there are different things to discover in every one of these. Learning to slow the mind down or speed it up to get into these different places will allow you to scan differently, will allow you to shape differently, will allow you to perceive and explore differently. And these ranges appear to be connected to the centers in the body. The beta range, where we live most every day, is right here, high in the third. Most people function with the third chakra, the first mind. And this is where the beta range activates. The alpha is a little lower. And deep alpha gets you down into your guts, into the area Roja has been exploring with the metaphor of the castle and the various descriptions he's used for the first mind. Now, if you can get yourself deep enough to touch theta, this is where dreams occur. In the deep space, this is where the really strange visions, awareness, understanding can happen. And there are some amazing things to be discovered there. Just learning to bump from beta to alpha, deep alpha to theta, back up to alpha to beta, maybe briefly up to the gamma range, and back to beta. This can be an incredibly useful thing to explore. Gives you a whole new perspective. One of the problems that science has today is they study the physical world. The thing is, there isn't a physical world. We know this from even our childhood songs, like Row, Row, Row Your Boat. Every little kid who speaks English knows the song, many who don't. You go on merrily, 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 because life is just a dream. What we perceive is just a dream. There is a wise man 50 years ago or so who said, "This isn't the real world, I can tell, but it's only one remove away from the real world." There appears to be a map, a pattern of stable, moving energies that define every physical thing here. And that something shines through that like a movie projector shining through a film onto a screen. And you're staring at the screen thinking that's real. But you can spend all day trying to change those images on the screen and have no effect. Because it's not really happening on the screen, it's just being projected there. Where it's happening is back on the film. If you can get back and edit the film, then you can change what's being projected on the screen. What you are seeing, what you are sitting on right now, the air that you're breathing, this, what I call your perceived experience, the PE, is only a projection of a map that we all share. And you don't actually sit in the PE any more than you sit inside the movie screen when you're watching a movie. You sit in the map. What's happening to you is in the map. All of it is the map. But you perceive yourself up there on the screen of your PE. The thing is that everybody's sitting at a different place in the map. Everybody. And logically, you can't be sitting in the same seat as somebody else. And even if you were, you'd be a little bit different in your perspective if you, say, sat on their lap. So what happens is every single person has their own PE, their own perceived experience realm. The PE in which you are functioning is different than the PE in which you are functioning. It's different than the PE in which I'm functioning. And so when a scientist or a group of scientists say, well, we're going to see what happens in the real world, the thing is that every one of those scientists is perceiving a different real world because they each live in their own PE. And there are slight distortions in what they perceive. And so they can never get really clear answers because they're all only seeing projections. If you can look online at some point and find a book by Hofstadter called Gödel, Escher, Bach. Gödel is Godel. Don't buy it. It's far too complex to read. I don't think I know anyone who's finished it. But just look at the cover. And on the cover there's a block of wood, and it's carved in such a way that a light shining through one side is casting a shadow of a G, and a light shining through the top is casting a shadow of a B, and a light from the front casting a shadow on the wall of an E. So, G, B, E, Gödel, Escher, Bach, the three shadows. So depending on which direction you look at this block from, you'll see a totally different letter. Science today needs to begin to explore the map and not the PE. And so this is an area that every one of us could benefit from exploring, seeing if we can get deep into alpha and perceive this stable field of moving patterns of energy, which everything around us is a projection of. And the more that you can begin to discover that map, the more you can explore it. And the more that you explore it, the more that you begin to change it and shape it and use it. For those of you who don't like the esoteric, the strange, you want something more hands-on, what you can do is start going out into the world and studying people. You're going to find that people communicate very differently now than they did 5 years ago. That all over the world communication styles are changing. People don't know how to act. They don't know how to interact. They don't know how to respond. Everybody's walking around a bit dazed. Just by watching people and studying how they communicate and how they relate to one another, you can begin to build up ideas. If you want to be scientific, call them theories about how people are changing, and thus about how we can communicate better. How can we relate to our kids or our parents better? How can we teach our students better or learn better from our teachers? How can relationships work more effectively? And this comes from studying the people. From those of you who like animals, well, if anybody who's watching this has been watching animals for the last 10 years, watching closely, you'll know that those animals are acting differently today than they did 10 years ago. Now, if you're 20, say, 25 or younger, you've changed enough in the last 10 years you might not have noticed. But if you're 40 or 50, you're going to notice that animals are acting differently today than they did 10 years ago. In the same way that students in schools are acting differently than they did 10, 15 years ago. And all of the teachers are talking about this. So you can study the animals. See how they're changing, how they're reacting differently. Try and figure out what's going on and how to better work with animals. If you teach or have children, you can study the children and see the changes that are happening in them. In some cases, you simply won't have the knowledge or experience to know what to teach them or how to communicate with them. Everything you try, you may feel like they're in another world or speaking a different language and you're getting everything wrong and they don't respect you or maybe even like you. But with practice, with working with the children, I'm not talking just 2-year-olds, I'm talking up to, say, 16. Working with the kids. To those who are under 16, yeah, you're still kids. Watch these folks, study them, see how they relate to one another. Let them teach you. And don't just do it passively, do it actively. Take notes on what they're doing. Compare it to other people's kids. Compare it to other people's notes. Try and build up theories so that we can begin to really get at a deep level how these animals are changing. Now, for those of you who have a nature bent, how many of you have talked to trees? Yeah, I know the tree hugger types will go out and hug a tree or talk to your plants. But how many people know that trees will talk back? Probably not many. The shamanic types, I was trained by a number of shamans over the years. The shamanic types will tell you that trees have sentience, consciousness, personality, and that you can sit down and talk with a tree and listen to it. And when I was young and heard that, I thought nonsense. But I did what I encourage you to do. I kept an open mind and I tried it. I went out on a nice day and sat down with my back against a tree and put myself as deep in alpha as I could go and started extending my senses toward the tree. Started trying in different ways to say hello and then listening. And eventually I heard an echo of a response. And I kept doing it and actually had my first conversation with a tree. You think that's silly? Well, it's fine. I thought it was silly. But I tried it and it's true. I found that young trees are just too young to have any self-awareness, so you won't get much there. Same with most plants. That if you can find a big tree and try it, they'll talk back to you. Most of them are 3/4 asleep because there's been so little energy in the world for so long, because nobody talks to them, because nature has been just a physical thing with all the meta missing from it for too long. But I've rarely had a tree that won't talk back once you wake it up. I've had some trees that are grumpy or angry, and it's usually because somebody's dumping chemicals or toxins and the tree's being poisoned. I've had some trees that are very immature and obnoxious. Most of the big trees I've worked with are kind and they're wise and they're gentle. They're what you'd expect. They're not always brilliant. They don't have all the answers, but trees will talk to you. Now, I once ran down the side of a mountain, one that took many hours to walk down, and this mountain was made of fractured rocks. Every time water gets there and freezes, the rocks fracture. And so there's always rock slides and all huge boulders that are loose. You step on one just slightly wrong, it shifts and you fall to your death. And so people are very careful coming down this mountain. But I started at the top and I ran full speed down this mountain. It took me an hour to make this trek that people who knew what they were doing took hours to do. And they said I was crazy because everyone knew that a single misstep, even just stepping on the wrong rock, it can be a giant boulder, but if you're not careful, it'll shatter right there or it'll slide and you'll fall to your death. But the reason I could do it is because I could listen to the rocks. And this seemed strange to me at the time, but the rocks talked to me. As I'd reach forward towards one, it'd say, "No, not me, I'm not stable." Another one would say, me, and they were like little kids. "Jump on me, I'm here." And I would, and it'd be solid. And at first I was tentative, but in just a few moments I found that these rocks were telling the truth and I could trust them. And I went racing down this mountain at an incredible speed, and it was such a rush. It was truly an amazing and wonderful experience. And so for those of you with a nature bent, I encourage you, talk to the rocks. Talk to the mountains. If you can find a river, try talking to the river and listening. Maybe it will tell you something. One more I'll toss out there because I think it's important, and that's dreams. Anybody who's gone to school and studied psychology or psychiatry or one of these mind ones, they'll tell you dreams are just the unconscious mind firing randomly based on recent experiences, and dreams have no meaning. Famous psychologists like Jung, who said that dreams are the map of our unconscious and the most important thing we can study, are generally dismissed as crackpots. But I encourage you to try it. Start paying attention to your dreams. This isn't something you can do with a lazy attitude. You've got to keep a notebook and a pen next to your bed and a little light or a flashlight. And when you wake, before you get up, you have to take and jot down as many things as you can remember from your dream, because the moment you sit up, that dream's going to fade out like sand in an hourglass. And then once you've got the notes, you've got to go to your notebook or your computer, and you've got to type it up. All right, I've got a note here that says baseball. Was that a baseball? Was that playing baseball? What does that mean? I've got a note that says monkey. Why is there a monkey? But as you sit and close your eyes in alpha, you start typing up what's in your notes. Parts of this dream are going to come back to you, and you can end up recording the whole dream. And then later in the day when you're awake, you're going to want to go back and look at it and study it with your intellect mind, with your conscious mind. Do a left-right kind of process. What's this dream got to teach me? And what you will find, I guarantee, because everyone I've ever shown this to has found, is that the dreams are not random. The dreams have messages from your unconscious, and those dreams are often important. The unconscious mind is simply the part of the mind that you don't have enough attention to pay attention to. The more you pay attention to something, the more conscious it becomes. It gets above the limit of perception. Everything below that, everything subliminal, below that limit of perception, is subconscious. And that subconscious mind is a lot of you. It's 90-95% of you that you can't get to. But it wants to talk to you. It wants you to notice what's going on. It wants you to say, what's this, what's that, why this other? And if you don't listen, you're missing out on a huge amount of what your own inner wisdom, your own self is trying to teach you. And so just studying dreams can tell you a lot. In that piece of dreams, I will give you a specific one. I have had, and I've talked to others who've had lately, a dream where they are in a city or in a huge warehouse, in a maze, in a big house that's shaped like a maze where all the rooms twist and things are hidden and strange, in a series of tunnels, in a cave underground. It's always the same shape, though the mind interprets it differently. It's a very large place with lots of rooms and passageways, some huge, some small. Many of them will be dirty, some will be clean. Some are unknown and mysterious. Some are dark, some are well lighted. But this huge warren, this huge maze of rooms and passageways. And in this maze there will be lots of other people, many of whom you don't know, just wandering around. You know, it may be inside your house, but there'll be all these new rooms and all these people you don't know in your house. And some of them will be violent. Some of them will be sneaky. Some of them will be as confused as you are. What's happening is this. We have awakened what can be called the world soul. The peace deep inside each of us that really is the center, the core of who we are, is a soul. And for a long time, those souls have all been floating around like bubbles in a stream. But now, the souls, the deep peace of people, of dolphins, cats and dogs, of trees, of rocks, of distant stars, of clouds of gas, of volcanoes, all of these souls are being linked in like a huge internet to this central hub, the world soul. And it's making this vast network of things that you can wander through. You can use this to learn to talk to your pets if you haven't learned to do that already. You can use it to get a better grip on talking with trees or listening to the world. Even mechanical things, if they're loved enough over enough years, will develop a piece of something that is sentient. A car that you've loved and hand-tended for a decade, given lots of affection and attention to, will develop a personality of its own. We see this mythology in, say, the Stephen King book Christine, or the movie. It was an evil personality, but what you create depends on what you put into the thing. Any piece of equipment can develop a little piece of sentience, and then it can connect into this world soul. And because you can't find this world soul in your waking hours, most of us simply aren't aware enough. You can touch it in your dreams when you're in a theta state, or deep theta, or deep alpha. And what it will look like when you get started is places you know or that seem familiar, but with tunnels and ladders and slides and passageways that connect you to all these places you don't know, and all these other people wandering around, also exploring this new connection. Sort of like the very first people who used the internet. There was no World Wide Web yet. There was no graphical user interface. It was kind of clumsy and dirty and difficult, but by exploring it, they began to make it something substantial. And it's the reason that you can now hold your cell phone in your hand and watch videos being taken on the other side of the world. Because people initially explored these caverns, these mysteries, these deep and hidden places. So this will be the last one that I suggest to you, is watch for this warren, this nest of rooms and mazes in your dream. See if you can find your way to something amazing there, or at least to connecting and interacting with others. And as you do, see if you can begin to sense that world soul, that connecting, in your waking hours as well. And eventually, we are all going to walk around wide awake in our day-to-day, tapped into that world soul. And there's going to be information we can download, information we can share, like a Twitter feed. Here's what I'm doing right now. Be able to communicate, like with a cell phone. Hey, what are you doing? Oh, nothing. Okay, let's go do this. Not some weird, mysterious, strange thing. Just a tool we can use to enrich and enjoy life. And it will happen because some of us are out there on the front edge, doing the exploration, helping to build the science and the structure behind it so that it can be something more. Now, it's possible that some of those ideas are big and scary and strange to you, so here's one more video I found that I think is relevant. There's a television series called In Plain Sight. Not a great series. I wouldn't go out of my way to watch it. Interesting, though, because the woman who is the star starts and ends every episode with a quote.
The summer after first grade, my neighbor taught me how to swim. Mrs. Duane on dry land was a sumo-sized single mom and CPA. 5 feet from the edge of the shallow end, she was my own personal safe harbor. Holding out her Stay Puft marshmallow arm, she'd say, "Close your eyes, count to 5, take a breath, and jump." What came next was a frantic mix of kicking and gulping, bubbles and gasps. Slowly, but somewhat surely, I made it through my turquoise-colored panic and into her waiting arms. Not because I wasn't scared, because she wasn't.
That's the first quote.
Ask any aquaphobic 6-year-old. There are benefits to staying out of the pool. You get to mop the nose plugs and the kickboards, eat ice cream without watching the clock for 30 minutes after, and the dry itch aftermath, the bleachy stench of chlorine, is someone else's cross to bear. But sitting poolside as others splash around can tempt even the most timid. If you're feeling brave, you close your eyes, count to 5, take a breath, and jump. And you hope that someone stronger, more currently reliable, your own sumo-sized CPA, will be there to pull you through the kicks and the gulps, the bubbles and the gasps.
There are those of us. I don't know that Roja is sumo-sized, but there are those of us who are a little more advanced, who are there watching you swim. So if you decide to quit sitting on the side of the pool and jump in and splash around and see what's actually there in the water. There are bigger people who will catch you, people you can ask questions of, people who will guide you. It's not something you're doing alone. There's no need to be afraid. Anybody have questions?
Someone asked if you see someone in a dream and they remember their dream to remember you.
If you see someone in a dream and they remember the dream, will they remember you? Probably not. Now, likely if you see someone in a dream, you're really touching their dreaming presence. You're actually interacting with a real person. But the vast majority of people don't remember the dreams. The vast majority of people don't pay attention. The vast majority of people are clueless most of the time. And even more clueless when they're tired and grumpy and don't want to wake up, or when their alarm's going off saying get up and go to school or work. So probably not. If you see someone in a dream, what you can do is force yourself to wake up, right? You get their attention, because some people in a dream are kind of dazed. You grab them, you talk to them, you make eye contact, you make sure they know you're there, right? Then you force yourself to wake up. You jump out of bed, you grab the phone, and you call them, and you keep calling them until they get their lazy butt out of bed. And if you can do it like that, if you can catch them soon enough, right? You make an impression in the dream, you wake them up soon enough, then they'll remember the same dream you do. Other questions? There are a lot of things that I know and have been through that most of you don't know or haven't been through. You can stumble through on your own and figure it out, or you can feel too stupid to ask about it because you don't want to look, embarrassed or foolish. You're wiser to ask, even stupid questions, because it may save you trouble later. And I may not always be sitting here to answer the questions, so might as well ask.
Someone's asking what would be a good way to document if you're out there and exploring and trying to figure things out.
What's a good way to document if they're out there and exploring? Are they talking about a dream specifically or watching people?
Anything.
How do you document anything if you're out there exploring? It's a fair question. I tend to do it like this. When I'm watching people, I try to get a hold of what it is they're doing or why they're doing it, and make mental notes. When I'm out in the world, I try to always have pen and paper with me. I find that if I have to open a laptop and type, it makes me too intellectual and left-brained and I lose track. But if I can just grab a pen and paper and scribble some notes. Also, diagrams are good. Right? I see this person is sad, so I write sad on my paper and circle it, and it always seems to be connected to something to do with loneliness. So I write lonely and circle that and put a line between them. Which, the loneliness seems to be related to something childhood. So I'll put childhood question mark up and put a circle around it, connect that in. And making diagrams like that with bubbles and links between them, as well as actual written text notes on what I've seen, is what I find the best way to do it. Now, when I was in university, when I was in high school, I was one of the smart kids, so I didn't have to take notes too much. I'd scribble my notes, and come test time, I'd look at them. When I got to university, though, I found there were lots of smart kids I didn't do as well. And I had to learn how to take notes. And it took me a while to learn this simple secret. When you're paying attention to something and scribbling notes, you'll get lots of information, but you won't get it all. And if you go back a week or a month later, you'll see a gap in your notes and think, what was there? What's supposed to be there? Or you'll see two ideas and you can't figure out how they're related. Because the stuff that makes sense to you when you scribble them may not make sense to you a month later. And some of the stuff, it may take you the next 10 years to really get all the pieces. So my recommendation, anytime you take notes, scribbling things down, making the diagrams, drawing or painting pictures, is that you do it as quickly and effectively as possible right then, but then you go home. And that evening, or if you don't have time, that weekend, don't let too much time pass, you copy those notes over. You either start with an entirely new notebook, or you go to your computer and type. I like the computer because then I can search for it later instead of having to read 1,000 pages. I can just do a search. Right? And you take those notes and you intentionally rewrite or retype everything, filling in all the blanks. And then when you go back 6 months or a year later, you don't have the blanks in your notes. It can also help to put really intelligent titles on any files that you save on your computer, to organize them by groups. Right? All the stuff about people I'm going to put in this directory. All the stuff about animals I'm going to put in this directory. And then it can be easier to find the things when you need them.
Someone wanted to know if there's anything you need to watch from dreams, if there's anything particularly dangerous to watch for.
Is it safe? Are dreams safe? Well, the simple answer is we're exploring a whole new frontier. And in new frontiers, there may be lions and tigers and bears. There may be scary people exploring that frontier. There may be, microbes that'll make you sick in any new frontier. I would say whatever you do, do with caution. And if you're not sure in your dream whether you should jump into some big stream and let it carry over a waterfall, then don't. Right? You're not sure you should talk to some big dangerous person, then don't. I'm not saying be afraid, I'm just saying be smart. In the same way that if you were exploring New York City for the first time, you wouldn't walk down every dark alley or, interact with every big scary person who you ran across. Be cautious. I've certainly run across dangerous things in dreams. But there's also a lot of beauty and wonder in dreams, so don't avoid it just because it might be scary.
So normally when we sense and shape, we sense and shape the map.
When we sense or shape, do we sense or shape the map? When most people sense or shape, they are paying attention to their perceived experience domain, to the PE, because that's all they know. But if you only shaped the PE, nothing would change. Right? It's like trying to change the light on the movie screen. By the time you've changed it, that's gone and something new is being projected. If you see changes, then you are shaping the map. If you sense truly, then you're sensing the map, but you may not realize it. You may only be paying attention to the PE, like I think it's Plato's shadows on the cave wall. By studying the shadows, you can have some idea what's behind you. But if you really want to change what's being projected there, if you really want to sense truly what's being projected there, you have to sense or shape the map, and not just the PE.
Normally when we sense and shape, we use different layers to give it some kind of feel, like go a level deeper to set it at the same as from going to the PE to the map? Or
You sense things or shape things at different levels. Is that the same as going to the map? No, and yes. The map is an entire domain. You're sitting right now in the map. You're living and breathing in the map. When you go a level deeper, you're just going deeper into the map. Now, you can think of the map as a nice metaphor, a bit like being in the ocean. A little fish or mermaid swimming around in the ocean, and you're so surrounded by seawater that you can't tell it's there. It's everywhere. You'd only notice if it were suddenly gone because you wouldn't be able to breathe. The substrate, the underlying energy is like that. It's above you, it's below you, it's everywhere. What you'll notice is if a warm current goes past you, or a cold current. What you notice in the substrate is the currents of energy. So a current of energy moving is something that will stand out as a thing there in the map. One that becomes a repeating pattern, a circle or a lemniscate, a repeating pattern there in the substrate will become a stable thing. And so the chair you're sitting on, the panda that you're sitting next to. These are built up from a series of stable patterns in the map. And so when you're going a level deeper, it's a bit like diving a bit deeper in the ocean you're swimming in. And you can go much, much deeper before you get to the bottom of that ocean. Likely, most people will never get to the bottom, just as most fish can't get to the bottom of the sea. It's too deep. Right? But you can move up and down within that. You can look at a given projection or moving pattern from different perspectives by swimming around it. You can go up or down in the map. Now, you may find that what you're doing when you're going deeper is moving to a deeper level of alpha, which is to say changing your mind state. You could, at the same way, if you know how, move up to a higher level and start studying it from the gamma or from the lambda. So this could be what you're doing, is shifting your perspective here. But ultimately, that's like changing your depth in the sea, and thus the perspective from which you're looking at the pattern. A little more complex than that, but that's the basics.
Someone wants to know if there are other cool things they can talk to.
You can talk to anything. Right? The question is, are there other cool things you can talk to? Yes, you can talk to anything. And some of them will talk back. You pick up a rock and talk to it, you probably won't get anything. If there's any sentience, it's too small to likely have any sentience there. But if there is, it's just too small to be smart enough to talk back. It's likely to say something like, I don't know, a single word equivalent that means sit on the ground and soak up the sun. And it's just going to say that over and over like a little mantra. Not a very intelligent conversation. But yes, you can talk to anything. Now, for the non-believers, I'm a non-believer. I try not to believe anything. But for the non-believers among you, you can doubt my experiences. But I've talked to ghosts. I've talked to spirits that were never human. I have interacted with these things that are little bouncing balls of light from about this big to about this big. I went through a field of 100 of them or so in New Orleans near a major energy node. And they were malicious. They were like Lord of the Flies. They were small, malicious school children who'd never had any training and never grew up. So they kept the mentality of a 4-year-old. They just became more malicious. And they like to throw energy balls at people to watch them jump because it hurts. They won't say much to you. They're sort of a bunch of nasty little kids, but they're there. I talked to something once on the bottom of a large set of wooden steps down into the Mississippi. And this thing claimed to be 50,000 years old. A personality. Had a sense of a huge, deep voice. It was whatever had happened to it. I didn't know much at the time, but whatever had happened, it chained it there and it couldn't get out. And so it just sat there for a very long time and watched the city grow up around it, watched the river change. When I was in California, I ran across what I would call fairies. You know, I'm not a big fan of kids' fairy stories. They're for kids, but they were little human-looking creatures that were generally, you know, this big to this big, and they floated above the ground, and they glowed like little lights, and they loved sparkly things. A window full of sparkly toys, and there'd be lots of them zipping and zooming around it. And I never got them to talk to me. But once I started noticing them, they noticed I was noticing, and every time I was in this town, they'd be coming up and tapping me on top of the head or poking me in the shoulder, and I'd look. And I'm in a dark alley alone. There's nobody there. Looking around. What is it? I'm going to take a couple more steps forward. And again, tap, tap. And so these things, they just played with me. And when I had been driving for 2 straight days and I couldn't even see straight, I was nauseous from all the caffeine and I was about to pass out, I was calling the fellow I was supposed to meet in Lafayette, Indiana. And he wouldn't answer his phone. He's a bit scatterbrained. And I tried several times, and I didn't know where he was or what to do, and I'm about to fall asleep at the wheel. And so I found a group of, I don't know, they were like sprites. I couldn't see them, but I could feel them. And they were just kind of bouncing around excited. And I said, all right, here's the guy I'm looking for. I showed them kind of an image of the guy. I said, go find him. He's very dense. Jump up and down, poke him, shout at him, whatever it takes to get his attention, and keep doing it until he calls me. 4 minutes later, he called me. I just had a feeling I had to call you. What were these things? I don't know. I had a dream once in Hawaii. And in this dream, there were people from all over the world meeting there to share. And I talked to many of them about many things, and it was a fascinating congregation and this conversation. And I went to an old person there, one of the wise ones, and said, if they're from all over the world, how come they all look like they're human? Shouldn't there be non-human things, big scary things, little people? And this wise one told me, in your guts, this is many years ago, in your guts, you're still scared. You're too freaked out by the ones who look different. And so your mind paints them all as if they were human. But most of these people here, they're not. If you weren't scared, if you're able to perceive without the fear, you'd see that there are all kinds of different things here. So yes, there are many, many things to talk to. Many of them will talk back. And a few of them are deadly or dangerous or vicious and should be very careful with. And until you know them well, none of them should be trusted. Don't blindly trust anybody, just as you wouldn't blindly trust a stranger in a big city. Just be cautious. But by all means, talk with them and see what they have to teach you. Some of the most amazing conversations I've had began because I walked up to a stranger and said, hey, who are you? Have you got a minute? Let's talk. Or, those are really ugly shoes. Something to break the ice and talk with them. And just phenomenal conversations. All over the world I've done this. And so I recommend this attitude in everything. Be willing to talk to strangers. Be willing to cross the street even if mommy says you can't. Be willing to try new things. Just do it with a little caution, a little common sense. Be open-minded, be cautious, be aware, and keep exploring.
We're very happy.
Yay! Cassidy actually set me up with a bunch of little stuffed animal companions here. The mouse was originally holding my microphone. He looked like a little Secret Service mouse.
Someone said that when you asked for questions they had for you, the first thought they had was, I don't care, I just want to steal stories.
And Cassidy called the thing the computer's sitting on the toadstool.
Yes.
If any of you can't see that, this is the toadstool. I have seen lots of crazy things around this world, and that's only this lifetime. I remember lifetimes far beyond human imagination, going back to almost the start of things, almost the very first big something that made it all happen. So, I have more stories than most of you can imagine. I don't mind sharing them. One more question?
Someone asked if dreams always have to be metaphors, or if sometimes you can take them literally.
Are dreams always metaphors, or can you take them literally? Sometimes maybe they're meta 5s or meta 6s. I think it's a silly question, but maybe that's because I don't understand it. Let's say that dreams can be your subconscious talking to you in the only language it has, which is pictures and fairy tales. Or, if you're dreaming of having sex with someone in Oklahoma, you could actually be having sex with someone in Oklahoma. Who knows? If you're dreaming of teaching a child, you could actually be teaching that child. Or if you went through a really horrifying experience, it could just be your mind reliving that experience. All of these things happen. Metaphors, actual experiences, or things that have no connection to anything present at all. They can even be prophetic. Dreams can tell you what's going to happen tomorrow or next year. All right, folks, that's enough for tonight. You want to set this up again? We'll do it again.
Yeah.
Good night.